Okay, Shavua Tov to everyone. First mention that our learning being for the schos of Teshuvah Eretz Yisrael, who are again under attack. And would say to the Sufa Dabar, Vayakum Hashem, turn all the rockets around and send them back to who sent them. Okay, today is Reish Chodesh. We're just going to checklist. On our menu today, we are going to continue from Hilchos Shabbos. We were at the end of chapter 243, the second chapter in Hilchos Shabbos, and that's what we're pretty much going to be doing from now until Rosh Hashanah, with maybe a few breaks if we need some extra shiurim on the holiday subjects in between. Okay, so we're just going to go through a quick checklist regarding Reish Chodesh, just reminders. So men have no restrictions on doing malacha, so we're free today to do laundry and to sew and to weave. However, women abstain from doing so due to a minhag, a very old custom, as Reish Chodesh was granted to the women as a present, matana from Hashem, because they did not willingly participate in the Chet HaEgel, and therefore they got Reish Chodesh as a holiday, which would infer that it's improper to let the woman just have the laundry pile up and do extra the next day, but rather, that's what I would assume, that's the understanding. Okay, regarding cutting nails and hair, even though there is no Talmudic prohibition practically of Rabbi Yehuda Chassav that applies today and tomorrow, no hair cutting and no nail cutting, this applies to all nails of hand and feet for 2 days. There is a mitzvah to eat a festive meal on Reish Chodesh. It is specifically or especially applies during the day meal. So that's today. Everyone is to have an enhanced meal of kavod Reish Chodesh. We increase in tzedakah on Reish Chodesh. We avoid visiting cemeteries on Reish Chodesh. Kibbutz Tzadikim, some are noig to visit, but in general we don't visit on Reish Chodesh. Those who want to visit Kibbutz Tzadikim should try to visit on Erev Reish Chodesh, as did the Rebbe. This year wasn't practical. This month wasn't practical, but in general that's what is done. Regarding learning your Tehillim, so there's a Messiah tradition from the Baal Shem Tov that each individual should study their Tehillim on every Reish Chodesh with the commentary of Rashi, and if inapplicable, then with other commentaries. And this minhag is that you will count of verses in your Tehillim for 12. You divide it by 12 months this year because we had a leap year by 13 months, and you do a few psukim each time. Each Reish Chodesh with Rashi. I'll just tell you a good one of today of my Tehillim. Sometimes you learn some very interesting hayras from Pirush Rashi that aren't brought in other classical sources. On the pasuk in Tehillim Lamed Zayin, Leva Rasha v'le Yishalim Tzadik Chaynan v'Meising. A person who borrows money is a Rasha. The Tzadik is compassionate and gives. There's a few interpretations of what that means. The classical interpretation is that a person who borrows and doesn't pay is a Rasha, while a person who borrows and does pay is a tzaddik. But Rashi says like this: a person who's borrowed money and doesn't pay is a Rasha, but don't worry about it. What does that help you that he's called a Rasha? You're still not getting your money. Says Rashi, tzaddik chayim v'neisen. Hashem is a tzaddik, and He'll arrange for you to get the money in other ways. That's what he writes. So you don't have to abstain from lending money because, maybe he's not going to pay me back. You trust in Hashem. Hashem will find a way to get the money to you. That's his issue. I need my money now. I can't wait for the next gilgul.
Also, the person who lent it, she didn't get the money back.
I don't think I have to come back in a gilgul for that. If you have to come back anyways, then we'll arrange it. Yeah, I understand. Okay. Okay, as we know, Yalav V'Yaveh, Shachris, and Mincha. If you forgot, you have to repeat. If in Ma'ariv, both of the first and second day, Reish Chodesh, if you forgot, you do not have to repeat. I will custom to say Hallel with a blessing, even if you aren't with the minyan. Nonetheless, every individual says the blessing to himself. We mentioned this in the previous year on Tuesday, that nonetheless, everyone should have in mind to not be Yaitzer with the Chazan, the bracha that he says, in order for you to say your own bracha of Hallel. We are particularly based on Kabbalah to wear our Rabbeinu Tam tefillin before Musaf. However, if you're running late, there is a debate whether it's better to daven Musaf without putting on Rabbeinu Tam but with the minyan, or to first put on Rabbeinu Tam and then daven Musaf b'yechidus. Different place can hasken in different ways, and so this is not something that's arbitrary necessarily. And now, in benching, of course, we say Yahweh, and we recite Migdal instead of Magdil. If you forgot Yahweh, you do not repeat benching.
If you forget Yahweh in benching, you have to go back and start over. Say it again.
No, so I just said, if you forgot Yahweh in benching, you do not have to repeat. Because the general rule is only when the meal is of obligatory status that you have to wash and bread, then do we say if you forgot the entire reason of why you had this meal, then you have to bench again. But if there's no obligation, even though we may say it's a good thing to wash on bread, then you do not have to repeat. But benching, no, it's a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah. And also, we don't say or would say. Okay, let's go straight into chapter 243. So let's just have a little recollection of what on earth we were discussing. So we went through we did most of the chapter. We have just a few points left. And this chapter was basically the opening discussion of a major subject that covers tens of chapters in Shulchan Aruch of dealing with Amir L'Nachri, asking a Gentile to do work for you on Shabbos. What we explained is that there are a number of possible prohibitions involved in having a Gentile do something on your behalf on Shabbos. One of them being, of course, the classical rabbinical prohibition of Amir L'Nachri, telling a Gentile do something for you. The shades is prohibited for a few reasons. We went through all the reasons in previous classes. One of the main points is that he's considered your messenger, your shliach, and it's as if you're doing it. So it's as if you're actually doing the malacha, even though it's the guy doing it, as if you're doing it. And of course, you can't do malacha on Shabbos. So that's one reason. We also mentioned that it's forbidden to make money on Shabbos, Char Shabbos. So if he's working for you and bringing in income, that is a problem as Char Shabbos. And then we also mentioned the issue of Maras Ayin. And this was really the first chapter, 243, and the Mechaber was really all dealing with this Isser of Maras Ayin. So I want to touch upon two more, a little bit about Maras Ayin, but beforehand I want to touch on a case, on a shaila that came up. It's come up a number of times, and I've noticed that there's a lot of confusion in it, even amongst Rabbanim. They don't really know how to answer. And we're probably going to do a daily halach on this eventually, but I already mentioned the case now that came up again over Yom Tif. Is it permitted for one to have a Gentile, to arrange for a Gentile to carry their child or push their stroller with the baby inside in an area that does not have an Eruv? So here in Tzfas, Baruch Hashem, we benefit from an Eruv, as I believe most communities in Eretz Yisrael. That there is an Eruv, especially being that pretty much all Yishuvim, according to Mishnah B'Tachon, have a taktsiv, have a certain amount of funding that they get for a fence, a security fence, and that is in essence their kosher Eruv. You may have to fix a few things here and there, but in general, all Yishuvim have fencing. Even the big cities that don't have fencing, nonetheless, Israel is a very mountainous region, and therefore a lot of the mountainous cities benefit from the Eruv type called Gud Asik, such as Tzfas Yireh Kodesh. In addition to Tzfas having a fence, or having not a fence, having in some areas, but having a Tzuras Petach, having the line on top of poles, over the poles, which is another kosher and valid form of an Eruv. It also benefits from being on a mountain slope, meaning below is the slope or on top, and therefore we have that making as if it's an Eruv, as if it's considered a wall around the city, and therefore even if part of the Eruv falls, it may not be an actual invalidation. Sometimes what we see here in the city, these the chutim, the strings that are on top of poles, it's for an additional chumrah of the mahadran Eruv. But from the letter of the law, in certain areas you can, the slope can itself be part of it. So in any event, the point is that here in Eretz Yisrael, we don't have to worry that much about this issue. But in Chutz La'aretz, such as in Crown Heights and many other cities, there is no Eruv, especially New York. New York is the most populous Jewish habitation in the United States. Close to, I think, 1 million Jews. And so the greater New York area has, of course, a lot of pockets of Jewish communities, and many of those communities do not have an Eruv or don't hold of the Eruv, but they do have one, but don't hold of the Eruv. I mean, it's as if there's no Eruv for them. Without going into all the debates of the poskim of putting an Eruv in certain areas, if it's valid or not, that's not our discussion right now. We just want to focus on the question that's relevant in a lot of these areas of the carrying. The question that come up by me was regarding London. London has areas that have Eruvin. London, of course, is a huge city. It has area. Obviously, there's no wall around the whole London. There's no line around the whole London. So London is not an Eruv city. There are pockets of neighborhoods that contain Eruvs, and some don't. And the question is, what do you do in these situations? So let's just understand the people asking these questions. If we tell them, no, you cannot have a Gentile carry your child for you, in essence, what we are giving them is a weekly 24-hour incarceration in their home. Because their children aren't old enough to walk on their own. And so therefore, they literally can't leave their house for 24 hours every Shabbos. And some may like it, some may not. You know, what do you do if you have a simcha? You have a wedding in town. You want to go to the Sheva Brachas. You want to go to the simcha. What do you do? So this is, what do you want to do if you go and go to shul? You want to hear shofar in shul? What do you do? What's in these situations? So we first have to analyze the halacha regarding carrying a child. Is it mutter to carry a child in an area without an Eruv? No Eruv. Can a Jew carry a child? So you may say, of course you can't. What's the question? You can't carry anything. So there's a concept in the Talmud called Chai Noises Atzmi. A live individual carries himself. And we see this, anyone who works in the Chevra Kadisha can testify to this, that a dead body has more weight than a live person. And the reason is because the life, the soul that's found in the body itself carries part of the body weight for you. And it's even when a person is sleeping, it's carrying part of the body weight. And therefore, a dead person contains a lot more body weight because he's not helping or assisting in carrying his weight at all. So this idea that Chai Noises Atzmi, a live person carries himself, is discussed whether it can be used to permit carrying a child. Can a child? So bottom line, I don't want to get too deep into this, bottom line is like this. But we do find theoretical debates in Rishonim regarding this idea, to apply it, to not apply it practically. The halacha is that certainly a child that's below the age of being able to walk on his own, we do not apply that rule. And therefore it is absolutely forbidden, just like carrying anything else in there without an Eruv. So a child who cannot walk cannot be carried in there without an Eruv. A child who can walk, so there we have a machlekes amongst even the Achrayim. The Alter Rebbe takes the position that it's absolutely forbidden, and this is practically the mainstream approach, that even a child who can walk on his own, we do not carry him. In a situation where, let's say you're walking with your 3-year-old, with your toddler, and he decides to place an injunction that he is not moving unless his father picks him up. And what do? You're 10 minutes away from home. What are you supposed to do?
Right in the middle of the street.
Yes, I got a child not too long ago from an individual who this happened in the middle of the street. The child refused. He had cars lined up, beeping. What does he do? Can he pick up his child or not pick up his child? So obviously, for the sake of sakana, for the sake of preventing sakana, obviously it's mutter. But the question is, so I don't want to go into that specific shaila, but these are some of the deliberations that take place regarding an actual Jew carrying. Now let's move to our case, which is not the Jew, but the guy. Now the rule is anything a Jew cannot do on Shabbos, you cannot ask the guy to do. And therefore, what should be the law is that it is forbidden to ask a guy to carry the child for you on Shabbos because a Jew cannot do so in an area without an Eruv. So we find a very strange Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah in chapter 307. The Mishnah Berurah there writes, it's in chapter 308. The Mishnah Berurah there writes, when he's discussing this whole idea of that you can't have a Jew carry, he then writes, however, it's permitted for a guy to carry. Let's hear it. It's permitted to have a guy carry the child. And this is a very difficult to understand Mishnah Berurah. And a lot of the Achrayim, the later poskim of today, have brought it up to try to understand it. And there's two approaches. One approach wants to say the following. We have a rule that, and we discussed this in our previous classes on this chapter, that even though in general, there's a prohibition of a Miranach to ask a Gentile to do something in your behalf that you can't do, in a case where the action is rabbinical, so you yourself only prohibit from a rabbinical prohibition, and in addition, it's a case of great need or great loss, or for the sake of the mitzvah, it's called shvus to shvus, then you're allowed to have a guy do it. Because asking a Gentile is rabbinical. Me doing this action, or rabbinical action, is also rabbinical. So it's two rabbinicals. It's a case of need, so the sages allow it. Right? We discussed this in the past, this rule. So they want to say like this. Today, all streets that don't have an Erev are considered a Rishus, are considered a Carmelis, are considered a rabbinical area. They're not considered a biblical area of prohibition of camp.
Everything that doesn't have an Erev.
Yeah, and they want to say the rule, and this is the rule for Ashkenazim, that pretty much there's almost no areas today that are considered a biblical Rishus Harabim, with a few exceptions. You have the street by Remote, Golden Meir could be considered a biblical Rishus Harabim. Eastern Parkway could be considered biblical Rishus Harabim. Manhattan can be considered biblical Rishus Harabim. Different areas, we have 600,000 people that go through a day, they can consider biblical Rishus Harabim. But in general, most streets in the world are not considered a biblical Rishus Harabim. So therefore, the whole idea of carrying those areas is only rabbinical. And a Gentile is rabbinical. And what, you're going to give this woman or man a 24-hour weekly incarceration at home? It's a time of need. It's a case of need. So therefore, they want to argue that it's mutter. In fact, because of this, you do find in some communities with no Erev that they are accustomed to have a guy push the baby for them wherever they go. Interestingly, one of the poskim who held of this, even though we would want to associate such a position with maybe the modern orthodoxy, where they take a more lenient approach, or whenever there's an ability to grab onto a lenient approach, they allow to follow it. This was the position of Rav Vosner, the Shevet HaLevi from Bnei Brak, one of the mainstream Haredi rabbanim of today. He held this way, and he in general held that you can't lock people up on Shabbos. He was very into making Eruvin, and his son has also built a lot of the Eruvin in the United States were built by his son, or at least under his auspices. And he even tried recently to build an Eruvin in Crown Heights. It caused a huge controversy over it. Of course, there is no Eruvin in Crown Heights, but I'm just saying they have for some reason, when it comes to Eruvin, they have I think the most lenient position of all the Rabbanim today. So this was his position also, that regarding asking. However, most poskim don't accept this approach, and they say the Mishnah Berurah was referring to a case where indeed it's a great need. The child needs to see a doctor. What do you do? Have a guy take him to the doctor on Shabbos. Well, anything's a great need, but what's the great need for a woman to go to shul? What's the great need for a woman to visit her friend and talk to her? Why is that a great need? I understand it's a nice thing. I understand that it's something we would want to do, but is that something that we can define as a great need? Now, maybe you'll argue, say, yes, we can. Well, I'll give you a case example that's brought in the Shulchan Aruch that we rule that you're not allowed to do, and take that example and then see what's considered defined as a great need. The example is, Baruch Hashem, a baby was born on Shabbos. So a baby boy was born on Shabbos. The bris will be taking place on Shabbos, if everything's normal. Now the question is, where to have the bris? Obviously, the baby and the mother are not sleeping in the shul. They're sleeping in their bed at home. So we can either have the entire congregation go to her home and do the bris there, or have the baby carried to the shul. Now, in a place with an Erev, there's nothing to discuss. Of course, you can just carry it to the shul. In a place without an Erev, what do you do? So this is a machlekes amongst the poskim. And we see that even in a case where it's for the tzarech of a mitzvah of bris milah, there are poskim who rule it's not allowed to be done, and this is the mainstream approach, as the Mishnah Berurah himself rules. You can't ask a guy to take the baby to shul, the moyel, and the whole congregation have to walk to her house and do the milah there. So now come and tell me that the same Mishnah Berurah is lenient to allow someone to ask a guy to take their baby to their friend's house so they can have a nice Shabbos conversation. Or to go to shul. What was that case? That case was about going to shul. It's a contradiction. So therefore, bottom line is like this. Bottom line is that practically the mainstream approach and directive is that it is forbidden to ask a guy to take your child for you, and in such situation that there are simchas, either it should be arranged to be done in an area that there is sleeping areas for all those who have babies to sleep there, or for the simcha meal to take place in the area of the mothers, where the mothers are with the children that they're unable to carry. Nonetheless, those who do rely on a guy and they have a guy do the work for them, we don't have to protest them, as the Alter Rebbe says something even more. The Alter Rebbe says that the minhag in his times was for the people themselves to carry the baby. They themselves would carry the baby. They would put the baby on the shoulders, talking about a toddler that can walk. They would put it on the shoulders, they would carry them. Under the mistaken conception, that a live person carries himself. So there's no issue, they were wrong. But the Alter says it's better not to protest them, because they'll tell you a secret, says the Alter, but they won't listen anyway. They won't listen anyways. Then what's the point? You're just making them do something b'mezid instead of b'shayk. So better not tell anyone. Okay, you can talk to me after the class.
Yeah.
So there is a concept here where we try to avoid, protesting people, but nonetheless, this is the mainstream approach. Okay, we're going to move on. Any questions on that? Okay, great. The Isser of Maras Ayin. So throughout this chapter, we pretty much discussed the prohibition of doing a permissible action that to the onlooker appears as if you're doing something wrong. Now, so there's a few points that we didn't. So the case example in this chapter that we discussed is that it is, even though that it is permitted in certain cases to have a guy run your business on Shabbos, such as the case we gave was like this. I own a number of JCC centers, okay? And I am renting it. Leasing it to a Gayish firm, a Gentile firm. I'm leasing it to them for 5 years. So is it now mine? It's theirs. It's their property. They're renting it. It's theirs. Everything's theirs. They're running everything. So can they run it on Shabbos min hadin? Am I transgressing a mir l'nachri? I'm not telling him. For all I care, he can pay me the money and leave it closed for the next 5 years. What do I care? I'm getting my money regardless. So he's not working for me. When he works, he's working for himself. He's not working for me. I have a total disconnection from him. He's just, my tenant. So there's no Isser of a Mir l'nachri. There's also no Isser of Schar Shabbos here of making money off of Shabbos, because again, the money wasn't split up because he can open it on Shabbos. It's a year lease. It's a 5-year lease. So there is no issue. However, the issue that we did say remains is Maras Ayin. People assume the Jewish Community Center is Jewish ownership, which I think maybe today a lot of people can understand that it's not always the case. Quite often, the Jewish Community Center is a large percentage is a Gentile population who use it. But nonetheless, that is, the name is kind of misleading, and and a lot of times, of course, it is owned by Jews. So therefore, that would be Maras Ayin. So that was the case given here, and the Mechaber says in this chapter 43 that in cases that everybody's aware that it was leased by a guy, because that's the way it's done. Everyone knows that it's done that way. Then there wouldn't be Isser of Maras Ayin. So I just want to discuss a little bit about this Isser of Maras Ayin, which we see throughout the Shulchan Aruch, and that is as follows. We have, in essence, three levels of prohibition. One, of course, being biblical, min haTorah. The second being rabbinical, that the sages made a decree. And the third being of a lower status, called Maras Ayin. It's rabbinical. The whole idea of Maras Ayin is rabbinical. But it's not as strong as a regular rabbinical prohibition. For example, let's give an example. A person's cat, okay, let's just give an example. A person's cat cut himself on a sharp end and was walking around near the kitchen on the counter, and some of his blood spilled into the cholent. A drop, mamash a drop. So we say, bittul b'shishin. Don't tell anyone, of course, just whoever saw it, keep it to yourself. It's bittul b'shishin, everything remains kosher. Now what if it was a nice amount? It's not bittul b'shishin, everything's treif. Cat blood is treif. Okay, so the cholent's gone. Now what happened to a person? A person cut his finger. Happens. And a little bit of blood got into the food. Do you need to have bittul b'shishin? What if there isn't, or you're not sure there's 60 times versus the blood? Do you need to have 60 times?
With the health issues, nowadays you have diseases and stuff. That's another thing.
Well, in that case, you shouldn't eat from anyone's food. Not just because of blood.
No, I know, but I'm just saying.
Just breathing over it. I agree. The best thing, if you want to be health conscious, eat only foods that you have grown in your own home. But anyways, so if the blood falls in, do you need shisha? Do you need 60 times? The answer is no. Why not? Because human blood is only due to maras ayin. It's only prohibited due to the onlooker, because the onlooker doesn't know whose blood it is. He'll think you're having a blood shake of some cat. He doesn't know what you're drinking over there. So because the whole issue is maras ayin, so therefore it doesn't need, it's not considered a real non-kosher food. The point I want to bring up is that to understand, because on the hindsight, it doesn't seem so clear that both rabbinical, why did I say there's three levels? One called rabbinical, the third called maras ayin. Maras ayin is rabbinical, so it's part of two. No, it's not. It has different, it's more lenient. It's different leniencies that aren't applied to a regular biblical prohibition, such as in this case, where biblical blood would need to have 60 times. Even rabbinical prohibited blood, a cow, if a person shechs a cow, only the beginning blood is biblical, but let's say any blood that comes out of the limbs is only rabbinical blood. That blood would still need 60 times. If a person cooked a chicken without doing malicha, without salting it, he would need to have 60 times the chicken, 60 times the blood, even though that blood is only rabbinically forbidden. However, blood that's prohibited due to maras ayin doesn't need to be nullified at all. Doesn't need to be, you don't need to have 60 times again. That's why we said in the case. Another case example is regarding fish. Fish has blood, and you do not have to salt the fish. Now, why don't we say this maras ayin? Because nobody notices. Nobody notices that you drink blood. Now, what happens if you cook the fish and you see a nice amount of juicy red blood in the pan? So you're not allowed to do to maras ayin, pick it up and drink it. However, if it mixes with other foods, it's not a problem. This is a leniency associated with maras ayin.
It's what with other foods you said?
Mixed, tarugas.
Because of the bittul issue.
It doesn't need bittul because it's only due to maras ayin that is prohibited. It's not intrinsically forbidden.
What does the mixture help them with?
Well, you don't see the you don't see the blood, so what's the maras ayin?
Oh, right. Mixed to the point where you can't see the blood.
Yeah. Another example.
Fish blood.
Sages prohibited fish blood due to maras ayin. If you're drinking a cup of fish blood, people won't know it's fish blood. Yeah, they won't know it's fish blood.
But if it's just mixed in with the food.
If you put a little fish, put like an anchovy on top of the glass, then everyone knows, okay, that's the sign. And so you put a dog in, then you have a sign. But otherwise, okay, another example that's given in Basar Chalav is regarding meat, soy, and imitation meat and dairy products. So today we have a lot of imitation products, and they could be very misleading that you can think that it's milk, dairy, or you can think that it's meat when it's parv. So the halach in these things is that you're not going to have them together because of the onlooker. You may think you're eating meat and milk together. However, here too, we have a leniency. What's the leniency? Number one, if let's say almond milk fell into your chicken, it's kosher. You don't need to have 60 times as if real milk fell in because it's not intrinsically prohibited. Another leniency is that if everybody is aware and knows that there are imitation soy products, imitation meat products made of soy, then everyone is already used to this idea. Everyone's used to the idea, and therefore you don't have to. So today that we have, it's very common to have parv ice cream. There is no maras ayin involved in bringing a parv ice cream to the table, the Shabbos table, after eating meat, or even during eating meat. And you don't have to have a huge sign that says on it parv. To all the maras ayin nicks, this is parv. Because that people know, and if someone's coming from the jungle, they're not aware of this yet. Okay, so we don't worry about jungle men. They'll learn, they'll eventually get educated. But we don't have to worry that there may be somebody in the world that hasn't yet been aware of parv ice cream. But in general, if it's just something new and people are not aware of it, then you would need to have an actual sign by it.
Okay.
Now, maras ayin, there's a difference in maras ayin and chashad. Maras ayin means the following. It means that the onlooker will mistakenly believe that this action is permitted to do on Shabbos. He sees you doing it, he'll think, okay, there's no problem. He's a religious Jew. We hear this all the time. I saw him eating it. I saw him doing it. Of course, it's mutter. Right? So that's the issue of maras ayin. When people begin thinking that because, and it's true, what we see other people do has an effect on our attitudes towards those actions. And even if we read somewhere it's us, it begins to slightly chip away from the severity when we see other people being lenient in it. So because of this maras ayin issue, that's what maras ayin is a worry that you may come to transgress.
What about the fish that's kosher but it looks like crab or something?
So once again, once it has
maras
spread,
ayin?
once it depends. If a person's going to eat kosher imitation crab in seafood on the beach, in Miami Beach, that's a non-kosher restaurant, yes, it's 100% marasayim. But if, he eats something that looks like crab with a huge sign on it, kosher imitation crab, then it's not marasayim. But if it doesn't have a sign, of course it's marasayim. It's not well known. It is not well known today that there is, in general, imitation crab. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, right. Unless you're in the Milky Way.
Huh?
Los Angeles, right? Milky Way, yeah. I used to see it in LA, but I haven't seen it here.
Right, so it depends. So in that restaurant, inside that restaurant, everybody knows that this is what they serve. But to take it outside the restaurant, it's not so simple. Regarding eating in a non-kosher restaurant, so this is another case example. I started saying marasayim is when we suspect you're going to do the prohibition, while chashad is a different worry, and that's a worry that you're going to judge someone else to be a transgressor. You're fine. You're steadfast. You know this is wrong, and now you're going to start saying this guy, he's an Eivra. So that's another. It's not called marasayim. This is called chashad. A person has to distance himself from chashad, from being suspected of a transgression. In other words, it's not enough not just to do the crime. You also can't do things that look like you're doing the crime. A person has to look clean for Hashem. We have a number of halachas in Shulchan Aruch based on this concept of don't do suspicious activity, such as it says, a gabbai tzedakah, a person who collects tzedakah funds. He's not allowed to collect alone. There has to be two people with him. Now today we're a little lenient in this, but in general it had to be done with two other people, as they're considered like testimonials to his actions. Number two, they testify to his actions. You're more bound to trust three people than to trust one person. Another example is that if he finds money in, let's say, the marketplace when he's walking around, he can't take it and put it in his own pocket. People may suspect him for stealing from the charity fund and putting it in his own pocket. So these are different halachas. A person has to distance himself from chashad. Another example. Person is not allowed to go down a road that leads to a church or to an Avodah Zarah, if that is, that's the only area that the road leads to. It's chashad that he's going to the church, that he's going to the place of Avodah Zarah. So regarding a non-kosher restaurant, Moshe Feinstein dealt with this question. And, someone wants to go to a non-kosher restaurant, not to sit and have a coffee or to have a Coke and, a non-charif salad, just, tomatoes, cucumbers, and some lettuce, kosher lettuce, check the box, let's say, or just tomatoes. So can he do so? There's no issue with the food. The food, he's choosing foods that are kosher. And the problem is that you see someone sitting in a McDonald's, with a hat and beard, it looks kind of strange. It looks a little weird. And here in Israel, you have McDonald's with hashgachas. I'm not talking about here in Israel, but in Saris as well you have. But in areas, that it's an obviously treif store, then the Igros Moshe writes that there is an isser here of marasayim and of chashad, both. There's two isser. The chashad issue is that one person will say, look at this guy, I saw him frying out this rav, just fried out. I have proof. Today everyone takes a picture. Next thing this guy knows, everyone's already speaking about why he fried out, and there's 3 different stories of why it happened. And all he was doing was getting a drink because he was super thirsty. That's chashad. Marasayim, however, is, the person says, he's an Erlich Yid. It must be there's certain things you're allowed to order in McDonald's. And he goes and he says, I'll order the fries. Fries isn't meat, but as you know, those fries contain lard that they were fried in. So this is the marasayim issue, people coming. So therefore, as he writes, it is forbidden to enter into a non-kosher restaurant due to chashad and marasayim.
Is there a more refined level of this regarding going into a rabbanut place if you're a Hasidic person instead of going?
I wouldn't. You can't say min adin that there is a isser of marasayim when we don't see min adin that it's actually a treif place. If indeed we know, I'll answer the question as follows. We don't say rabbanut hashgachas is not kosher. What we do say is that they're trying. They may not be trying enough. That's a big debate within the rabbanut. Let's leave that out. But they're trying. But everyone agrees, including the rabbanut, that they're not acing it. They're not acing it. There's a lot of problems. So we can't point and say it's treif just because we have suspicions. But and therefore, for that reason, you can't say it's maris ayin to go. I wouldn't go that far and say there's maris ayin to go inside. I would not go that far at all. On the other hand, if let's say as it was, a few years back, where the Rabbanut discovered that the stores under the Rabbanut Hashgachas that were selling Rav Yerushalmi were not removing the kares blood from the hearts that were inside that Rav Yerushalmi delicacy that was served, and that's an Isser kares. And obviously, it's a treif restaurant. Just because it has a sign on it that says kosher, if they're serving treif, it's still a treif restaurant. It doesn't. There's no. The words don't matter if they're serving treif. So these restaurants were discovered. These restaurants were discovered to be serving treif, and until the Rabbanut got their hands on it and put out an all-out prohibition that there's no more serving hearts in restaurants, which is what happened. I was involved in Hashgacha when this occurred. And one day we had, 10,000 hearts to do. The next day, no more hearts. No more hearts. They lost the heart to eat hearts, right? No more hearts. Because of this issue, because they saw that the mashgichim weren't showing up or weren't doing their job, or who knows, they don't have enough manpower, and the restaurants weren't taking care of it. So someone ordered Rav Yerushalmi with Rabbanut Hashgacha was eating kares blood inside the heart. Congealed blood in the heart of a chicken is kares. So that's an example of a case where then it would be actual maris, it would be actual forbidden to eat in such a restaurant, maris ayin to go inside. Another example that happened not too long ago. In general, one of the differences between Rabbanut and Mahadran is that Mahadran suspects for various different things of treifus the Rabbanut does not suspect. But we know that it's not just there's not just an obligation to properly slaughter an animal, but you also have to make sure the animals which was slaughtered is a healthy animal. It's an animal that has one of the illnesses or one of the injuries that can define it as a treifa is completely treif, even if it was shechted by the most erlich yid in the world, with all the kavanas of the Arizal. It's still a treif animal. So one of the things that Mahadran Hashgachas do that Rabbanut don't do is checking what's called the tzemes hagidin. A bird, fowl, poultry contain about 11, I think it's 11 or maybe 18, it's 18, sinews by their legs. And because today what's done is that the chickens are fast fed in, what's the word called in English? I forgot. It's called halata in Hebrew. Basically, they're like fast fed very quickly. In 3 months, they grow what a normal chicken would take 1 year to grow, probably even less actually. And so because of this, their body weight is unproportioned, is uneven, and it causes tremendous weight on their legs, which are still small, and it causes a suspicion of tzemes hagidin that the sinews break. Now, if by a chicken even one sinew is broken, it's a big problem.
Wouldn't that be considered cruelty?
It's a treifus. That's another issue. We were talking about the laws of treifus. So this would cause that the sinews would break, which is a treifus. So the Rabbanut doesn't suspect it because it's rare. And they have upon what to rely. But there was a period of time that there was an illness. There were illnesses that the chickens got. And it caused that their sinews broke very often, to the point that it's halacha min adin to check for it. And the Rabbanut took them a little slower to get this into action, and they didn't give the hera. So for a number of weeks, the chickens were still being kasher and sold. These chickens are treif. They're treif chickens. That's another example that such a place you can't eat in such restaurants, and you would be marasayin to go into such, especially at that time, because people will think, oh, it's just rabbis making a big deal. Other hashgacha companies, politics. It was usher, and Rabbanim came out and told people that you have to kasher your whole kitchen if you went ahead and you cooked the Rabbanut chicken.
You don't have to get into all these next details, but I was curious that sometimes you hear that they don't serve meat, but a chicken or meat, if it's a more permissible and less worried to go to a rabbinic place for a hard vegetable meal.
Private question.
I thought some people say that it's okay to go to like a Starbucks and have like a black coffee.
Okay, Starbucks is a little different because Starbucks, its main feature is coffee, which is benign of kashrus issues.
But they definitely sell non-kosher
I
food.
understand, you know what, and maybe it could be that there's a, you know, there's a fast food, but there's a supermarket, Publix, they sell kosher food, they sell non-kosher food, but everyone knows you get kosher food there as well. So it's not the same issue with Mount Sinai. When you go into a McDonald's, what are they selling? Are they there to sell Coca-Cola, or are they there to sell Mac burgers made of horse meat?
There's a website called Kosher Starbucks, and so they said that they discriminate between whether somebody lives there or is a traveler, and they say that there's a leniency if you are a traveler and you're visiting and you having there's no problem, of course, with just having black coffee, but they say that as a traveler that they're more lenient than if you live in that community.
Regarding Morrison, regarding Morrison.
Okay, bottom line, as I said, Starbucks is a different story. There's no kashrus issue with having a coffee that does not have any additives in it. There's a chumrah not to drink it, I agree, but we're not doing it. It's kosher. Especially this comes up if, let's say, you're you know, going cross country,
Exactly.
and if you're not going to have coffee, it's not much of a sakana. Person falls asleep on the room. So you're going to be machmir, not enter because of Marasayim, and enter the whole road into danger, including yourself and your family. Of course, that's silly. And in such a case, get yourself your kosher coffee, get a few of them, and continue on your road.
Even McDonald's.
Okay, in such a case, maybe even McDonald's you need to. I don't know, depends on how much you're falling asleep.
Definitely open on Shabbos, doesn't matter.
Goyim are allowed to be open on Shabbos. There's no obligation for going to keep Shabbos. Right? I don't care if they're open on Shabbos.
But
Okay, that's the end of chapter 243. We are beginning chapter 244. Chapter 244 is a continuation of the concepts and ideas explained in 243, but in a different angle. 243 dealt with Marasayim cases where everything's been clear. There's no Schar Shabbos, there's no Amiru L'Nachri, just that what will the Almoker say when they see this place running on Shabbos and it's known to belong to a Jew. Now this is talking about something more practical for us, this next chapter, which is giving jobs over to Goyim, and there's a chance, or there's pre-knowledge, that the guy will do the job on Shabbos as well. This happens today. You know, back in the day, if you, let's say before the internet, if you were living in Sfas, pretty much everyone who you know was Jewish. You're having from people doing work for you. There's nothing to worry about. But today, with the online world, there's many different jobs that can be taking place across the world. They have a website where you can you sign up. I forgot what it's called. I've used it before. And you can choose people from different countries in the world to do work for you. And they do work for you. Very cheap work.
Guru.com.
Hi,
There's a few of them,
I'm your assistant, here to help you throughout your day.
as I said.
Yeah. She's in Brazil.
Right, so you can have people all over the world doing work for you. And get cheap labor. It's amazing. You can get super cheap labor. You know, in Bangladesh and in India. You have to be careful with scammers also, but nonetheless, you can get very cheap labor in these places. And the question is, what do you do? They may be doing the work on Shabbos. Or let's say, you know, here in Israel, again, we don't have such an issue when we're talking about brick and mortar stores because we know a law in Israel, you cannot be open on Saturday. You can't open your store on Shabbos. So you know, it's not as much of a worry. But let's say you live, you know, in Chutz La'aretz, you want to give your shirt to the dry cleaners for them to dry clean. They may do it on Shabbos. They may work on Shabbos. And there's many other cases of the like. So this is one of the chapters that deals with this subject. There's other chapters as well that deal with it, such as in 246, dealing with it's dealing with mail, and we have 252, which is dealing with actually laundry, and there's a launderer. And this chapter this gives a general rule and also focuses a lot on building. Let's say, you know, you have a building project that you hired Goyim to do. Can they continue working on Shabbos? You know, if they can't, that's, you know, and they're not working on Sundays also, that's 2 days out of the week that they're not going to be working. It's a lot of time to take out. So let's see. We're going to read inside. When the first if, again, is Siman Reish Mem Daled Sif Aleph. Pesach Adam Pirush Masne im Eine Yehudi al Hamalacha. Bekayt Tzadamim Veine Yuda Eisa La'atzmei. V'af api shoyse b'Shabbos mutar. Medvar Amorim Betzina Shem Mekirim Hakol Shazum Malach Zanas B'Shvavis Shel Yisrael Hi Avalim Ha'is Yedum V'Samas As Shel Reya. Es Eine Di Eisek Eine Yedeh Shekatzat Tzvayim Shel Plei Nisach Eine Yud Asas Le Malach B'Shabbos. Vicha Pesach Im Eine Yehudi. Livna Zay Chatzei Kaisel Litzol Yisadei Ha'is Malach B'Medina Ibesech Kum Asala Nichal Asas Le Malach B'Shas Ne'Reim Sheni Yid Mishapasik. Agal Filim Dor Bein Aviv Dekachavim Yishloch La'orchem Abayim Shan L'Neveis Shachtu Yisai. Meist Malach Chutz L'Tchum Gameiner Acheres B'Sech Tchum Mishalach Shez B'Malach Mutter. Okay, so in this first halacha of the Mechaber and Alter Rebbe, also when he brings this, there's a lot of chedushim of the Alter Rebbe in this chapter, and that he differentiates the following. It says like this. Again, we're still going with the introduction of last chapter of to permit anything done by a guy on Shabbos, you have to negate all of those issues. So he brings that there are cases in which it is permitted to have a guy do work for you on Shabbos, meaning you're actually benefiting from his work on Shabbos, and it doesn't transgress anything. How is that? So it says like this: you have to turn this guy into an independent worker, into what's called a kablan and not a sachir. He's not your hired work. He's not considered your schir yoim, your employee. So rather, an independent, thank you, an independent contractor. He's a kablan, an independent contractor, not your hired employee. How do you do that? How do you turn someone into an independent contractor versus a hired employee? The way you do that is by paying him for the job. Such as, for example, I am giving him my computer to fix. I go to my computer, got knocked off 2 hours before Shabbos, something happened. I give it to him, I bring it to a Gaisha store, and I said, listen, I need to pick it up next week. It's vital for my work. I need you to fix it. It's going to cost, 600 shekel for this job. I'm paying you 600 shekel. He's not my hired help. I didn't hire him. I gave him a job to do. He's getting paid for this job. It's called a kablan. Now, everyone, let me just clarify, throughout this and every other chapter that we're going to be discussing, this is a very important clarification that we must mention. And that is, it is never, ever permitted to tell the guy, do it on Shabbos. In all these cases that we're going to give leniency of permission, it's that if he does do it on Shabbos, we don't prohibit it. Or even if he might do it on Shabbos, we don't prohibit it. But if you're telling him to do it on Shabbos, he's mamish your shliach. He's mamish your shliach. Then he's no longer independent. He's dependent. He's following your instructions. So that's completely forbidden. Furthermore, if I tell him, according to Jewish law, I cannot tell you not to fix my computer on Shabbos. However, let it be known, you have about 5 minutes before sunset, and I need the computer back 5 minutes after nightfall on Saturday night. But I'm not telling you to do it on Shabbos. So, in essence, he told him to do it on Shabbos, and that's forbidden as well. So, even if he really needs his computer by Sunday morning, he cannot tell him, if the guy tells him, listen, our working out, we're going to have when is it going to be? I said, listen, we work tonight. Today, we're already going to be closed. I'm not going to be able to work on it today. Tomorrow, we're going to be open from, 9 to 3. And Sunday morning, we open again at 9 o'clock. Can I have it ready by 9 o'clock? He says, yeah, sure. But what does that mean? He's going to work on it on Saturday. So then absolutely not. You can't tell him to do it because it's as if you told him to work on it on Shabbos. If you don't tell him anything, and he works in it and it's ready 9 o'clock, then it's fine. Because you didn't instruct him for the Birva. So that's an important clarification, which is not written in this halach explicitly, but it is written in the Alter Rebbe in a few places, and it's clear from the Pesach.
What if he told you though? You didn't ask him, but he told you. He said, I told you the hours, and he said everything, and you. That's
fine. I'll tell him back. Listen, it's thank you very much. It's your prerogative. I'm not obligating you when to work. You are a independent contractor. You get to decide when you work on it. Okay. I'm not giving you a due date that forces you to work on Shabbos. So that's number one. No mentioning of Shabbos in this condition of the work. Number two is that Pesach Damim. Paisik done, which means that you have given, there's a set payment that will be given for the job. Number one, it's a job. I didn't hire him, I want you to build me a house, and I'm going to pay you by the hour. I gave him a job to build a house. I gave him a job, build me my computer, I'm paying you, or fix my computer, I'll pay you, $50 an hour. No, that's no good, because then he's your hired worker, because you're paying him per hour. You didn't give a lump sum of payment for the job. So it has to be two things. It has to be a specific job, and it has to be also that there's a set payment that was already established for the work. In that case, we say he's not your shliach. He's his own shliach. He's working for himself because he doesn't have to do it on Shabbos, and he already got paid. So when he actually decides to do it on Shabbos, he's not working as your messenger. He's doing it on his own initiative. But if he's a hired work that I'm paying per hour, every hour of Shabbos that he's working for me. I'm hiring him every moment, so he's my shliach every moment to work for me. That's the difference that's explained. Now, even in a case where you did paisik damim, you gave a set amount, you gave him a specific job, he's an independent contractor, a kablan, and not a schir yaim. If it's done in public and everybody is aware and everybody knows that this is a Jew's work, for example, it has, some Shmir Sinai sticker on the computer, so everyone who walks into the store sees this, of course, this is a Jew's computer. So in such a case, if it's farhesya, it would be forbidden. And because of this, there's a general rule. In general, the rule is the following. All movable objects, metaltalin, you can give to a guy to work for you over Shabbos under the conditions we just said. Don't say it's Shabbos, hire him for the job and establish a set payment for the job, not per hour. However, anything that's attached to the ground, buildings, anything that has to do with the building attached to the ground, it's considered public because he's not going to hide it, right? There's no way to hide construction of a house. It's in public. Therefore, because of Maras Ayin, it's forbidden, flat out. It can't be done. So that's why, according to halacha, you can never have a guy continue renovations or building of your property on Shabbos. And even if sometimes if a person doesn't think of this b'ma'od moed early enough in the contract, he can enter into big problems. Because the contractor, even he's a contractor, you're not paying him per hour. Maybe the contractor is paying his workers per hour. That yes, but you're not paying the contractor per hour. And what he does with the money you give him is his decision. So this is contracted work. This is not work per hour. But nonetheless, you have the Maras Ayin issue here because everyone sees it being done on Shabbos, and this property is owned by a Jew. Now, even if, let's say, nobody knows it's owned by a Jew. I'm building it somewhere in New York. Nobody knows. I'm building it in Brownsville. Who knows that a Jew is building a store in Brownsville? Right? It's full of blacks. But number one happens to be that almost all the stores there are owned by Jews. So all the Jewish people that are there will know that the store being built there is Jewish. What about your family? It says there's a chashash even for your family or someone who's, walking back from Talucha. And he's walking through Brownsville and he sees them constructing this store and he knows the blacks aren't running the stores there. That's just a fact. 90% of the stores there are owned by Jews. And so there's a chashash of Maras Ayin, even if it's only to even one Jew. And therefore, it would be forbidden to be done on Shabbos. And the only case that it would be mutter is if it's not an area where any Jews pass by. It's not considered a yeshuv. Nobody goes there, and there's no Jews who live there, and only purely the Goyim will be doing it. And you can't walk there on Shabbos because it's outside of Tchum Shabbos. So let's say here in Israel, they want to build on some mountain, somewhere new yeshuv. So if there's not going to be any Jews that can walk there, there's no Eruv, it's outside of Tchum Shabbos, and there's no Jews that are involved, and there will be no security soldiers, then it would be mutter. But practically these conditions are almost impossible to fulfill, and therefore work is not done on Shabbos.
With the marshal you gave about walking through a neighborhood like Brownsville, you don't have to know specifically which Jew the building belongs to?
No.
So what kind of Maras Ayin is there if it's not?
You may think, we say Maras Ayin means that you may think it's mutter to do.
Say it again?
You may think it's mutter to have a guy build your home on
I
Shabbos.
see, okay.
You may make a mistake.
Okay.
Chashad is when you suspect the guy of being a transgressor.
Right, that's it.
Now, one of the exceptions that's given to this is a shul. A shul is a tzarich mitzvah, And in that case, also everybody knows that it's being built in Kabbalah. It's being built as hired work, and he's not acting as my messenger. Bottom line is that there were leniencies given throughout history to have shuls built by a guy even on Shabbos. On the other hand, Alter Rebbe writes, as writes the Magen Avraham, one should avoid very much from relying on this leniency, because what will the Goyim say? This is a very interesting revolutionary idea here brought down by the Magen Avraham the Alter Rebbe. And that is, classically, the concept of Chilul Hashem is to Jews. To Jews. When we say it's a Chilul Hashem, you're just desecrating God's name amongst Jews. The halachic definition of Chilul Hashem is when you don't sanctify God's name in front of 10 Jews. It's not about Goyim. And over here, the Magen Avraham brings the concept Chilul Hashem applies also to a Goyim. That the Goyim are going to see that on the Jews, Saturday, on their holy day to their God, they have Goyim do work for them and build their temple. So you see, these Jews, they don't take it very seriously, their holy day. They find tricks. They find all these tricks to work around, workarounds outside the law. And this is a Chilul Hashem for the Goyim, that the Goyim will have the Jewish religion be put down in their eyes. And therefore, the place can conclude that it is not the best and ideal thing to rely on these leniencies called Chilul Hashem to the Goyim. Okay, we're going to conclude here for today. It's the end of Sif Aleph. We have another 4 Sifim, which next week we will do. Blessed month to everyone.
I assume, I should assume that there may be other indicia of